Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Cokerhook, and this evening we're going to be talking again with Susan and Dean, InnerArchitect, on our second show discussing social media. So, Susan, Dean, thank you again for being here and coming back to Reference Point for yet another discussion on social media.
It's great to be here, Dave.
Dave,
Thanks.
we love it. We love you.
Oh, what can I say? Thank you. Well, look, last time we were talking a lot about laying a foundation, that using the blog mechanism as a central point or a forum to be able to start creating messaging, and that messaging needs to be more of developing relationships as opposed to pushing an agenda. And but that's a central point. We were discussing last time also that there are so many different avenues for social media that Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Posterous and this and that and the other thing all have a different flavor, and that if you're a business owner or you're a professional in a circumstance like mine, one or the other may or may not be an optimum source or location for you, or you have to decide how you want to use it. So I kind of want to start our discussion this evening from there. I've got this blog now. And I can go on multiple channels. How do I figure out what is the right one for me to reach the public I want to reach?
Well, it starts in understanding and knowing clearly who that is. Who is your market? You know, who do you want to reach? And then you go and you find out where are they. You look for them on Twitter. You look for them on Facebook.
How do you look for them? I mean, it's like, I know how I can stand up at a stadium when I go someplace to see if there's anybody there I know, and something about how do you look for someone in these environments?
Well, Dave, we didn't talk about this, but Twitter has 555 million registered users now. Many of those registered users are beginning to post on a daily basis. There was a stat that came out recently that said 76% of registered users are now posting information. That gives you a real good idea of the amount of people and engagement that's going on. There are a number of ways on Twitter to find that kind of information about your target audience. One of them is they have a feature called lists, and you can drop people into lists, go ahead and give those lists a name, and then begin to monitor what they're doing, what they're saying in their tweets, and watch. So you can create a list, and what I've done is created a list for all the major newspapers in the United States. And so I can get up every morning and I can look at 51 newspaper feeds in this list, and it allows me to see news. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking, let's say you have a yoga business and you're looking for people talking about yoga classes and working out, you can go in and effectively begin to find real-time conversations of people sharing their experiences in their yoga class, or talking about the apparel, or talking about how sore they are and how they wish they knew how they could get around or over that hurdle. And so there are a lot of opportunities. That's just one idea. There are a lot of opportunities on a global basis, or you can drill down on a more local basis through the search.
Yeah, and if you're someone who's not yet involved deeply on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever, Google is a great tool. You just would say, Company X on Twitter, or Company X on LinkedIn. And so that's a good way. And so what you'll see is that if they're on Twitter, then you'll see their account will rise to the top, and you'll just click on that, and you'll be brought to their page.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So I have my blog. I know who my target public is, and now I have choices as to whether I should use Twitter or use Facebook or use one of the other many sources, channels. And again, how do you figure out whether it isn't necessarily just because a lot of people are there? Correct. I mean, if I have a very unique business, do I want to be on? Does Facebook offer me advantages? I don't know. I'm just throwing out these questions because I don't know. And so how do you figure out where you should go?
Well, without a doubt, our experience so far, and we've had some pretty good experience. We've both been on Twitter since 2007, when it was kind of beginning to start to take off. And we've seen that it's a one-to-one communication tool. you're able to talk to people or brands directly. You're able to do it in a way that's real time, and you can start conversations. That's something that's more difficult to do on Facebook, if at all. You can go into a Facebook page and leave information and make a comment, but oftentimes you're not going to receive the same type of input back. We're finding with Twitter that we can go out, we can target the audience that we want to speak to, and then ask questions. We can ask questions with call to actions. And then, as we were talking in our first show, we were talking about having content to curate and to push forward from your blog. One example, we were working with a winery in Napa Valley, a very small boutique winery, very expensive products, and they were going to go to an Asian wine tasting event, and they wanted to meet a particular sommelier from Asia who was very well known. They had tried emailing, they'd tried all sorts of things and calling, they couldn't get through. We went in and helped them understand that they could communicate on Twitter, and we were able to secure a meeting for the general manager who was flying over to Asia about a month ahead of time.
So you can, that's Twitter sounds like in a certain sense, if you're doing this one-to-one kind of thing, it's what the instant messaging concept was several years ago. Everybody's IMing, here I'm over here, come, and but it's sort of more of a it's formalized. It's got credibility. You know, where IMing was just a little, you know, hey, you know, what's the answer to this question here? I'm trying to pass this test, or whatever. So am I on the right track here? Or?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually two ways to communicate via Twitter. Many companies, or most companies that we see, are not taking advantage of the direct communication. What they're doing is they tend to just mass broadcast. The technique that Dean is talking about is actually where you put an @ sign in front of the user's name. And what that does is it delivers a message to them directly in the public environment. So anyone who's on Twitter knows that there's an area that you go to pick up the messages. They're called mentions or responses. So it's kind of like your inbox, and so you go there and pick up the message, but at the same time, you know, the public has seen it.
If I'm sending a message directly to you and everybody else sees it?
The majority. There's an algorithm there. You can't have all of your followers see it, because you take a look at somebody like Starbucks that has 3 million followers.
Right, but I mean,
you wouldn't be able to get to all of them.
It's not a private message. It's never a private message.
You can create a private message.
You can create a private
There is a
message.
private message channel, and fortunately many of the users use that channel to promote themselves, and it's almost become a spam channel. So many people, unless you know the people you're connected with, ignore that channel, which is too bad, because there's a lot of value to being able to speak privately to people.
So what's the advantage of Twitter? Because it's a short thing. You only have, what, 140 characters or something like that, and so it seemed initially when Twitter first came out that the idea was you wanted to have everybody and their brother and as part of your whatever that universe of Twitter users that are tied to you is called, and you were going to tell them whether you liked the coffee this morning at whatever your favorite coffee place was.
Right.
But it's evolved, hasn't it? I mean, it's not just a I don't know what to call it, but it seems to have become different, or maybe it's the same platform, but its utilization has become more professional rather than you know, casual. Is that true?
Yeah, I think it depends on, you know, what circles you're traveling in. I think that it has become a very recognized source of information for business people. It's also become a very recognized source for getting information immediately as it happens. You know, the sad time when Whitney Houston passed a few months ago, that information spread like wildfire on Twitter immediately. When President Obama won the election back in 2008, Dean and I learned about him getting elected on Twitter 5 minutes before it came out on the television.
Oh, wow.
We were picking up the states that he won on Twitter before they were announcing it on the local news channel.
Oh, wow.
You think about Occupy, that movement. You think about Twitter, and it's a news channel, but what you're talking about, Dave, is really starting to add fruition to using Twitter, and that is companies are beginning to understand that they can actually directly speak to end users. They can directly speak to referral partners. They can directly create call to action messages. They can make offers. Recently, Twitter came out with what's called promoted tweets, which allows you to push a tweet forward in far greater numbers in front of more people. It's an advertising type of platform, but you're able to promote a particular tweet and move that forward into a much larger reach than you normally would have. So it's becoming more of a business channel. It has many advantages. I think that Susan hit it on the head. If you're following the right people, or you list the right people who are in your niche, the thought leaders in the niche, the C-level people, the people who you're maybe your end users, you can put them in different lists and you can watch what they're saying, and you can jump in and add to a conversation, make an offer, possibly customer service, help somebody who's struggling.
And how does that fit into the blog then? I mean, if the blog is my central point, and it sounds like Twitter can be used for a variety of things, but if I'm starting this, going down this path, and I'm starting on the path by creating a blog, then where does Twitter fit into the next, you know, I've got the big toe in the water, now I've got half a foot in because I'm starting to do something with Twitter tied to my blog. How do I do that?
Okay. Well, you've identified the people that you want to get in front of, either by creating a list like Dean had mentioned, or using the search feature on Twitter to identify people who are having conversations that indicate that they're interested in what you have to offer. So in either situation, you can direct a message to them by using that @ sign, and then say something to them, and then include a link to your blog. You know, what do you think about this? You know, and then deliver the link to your blog, and there out it goes, and they get it.
And that's a great point that Susan brings up that dovetails into another point that we both are very active in. Twitter's created something called hashtags, and those hashtags are simply #, and you can create a hashtag with a keyword that will essentially jettison you into what looks like an old chat room back in the day in Web 1.0.
Right.
But it's a way, #law, whatever it may be, San Francisco Giants, whatever your passion is or whatever you're looking for, #yoga class, whatever it may be, you usually find people talking about what they're doing and how it's affecting them, whether it's business or it happens to be end users who are talking about their experience with a product or service.
If I'm using that mechanism and my business is localized, like my reach for my business, I am an entrepreneur in X industry, and I really, and it's the sort of thing where I have to, I do things for these people. It's not like intellectual property where I could be anywhere on the planet doing something for somebody. I actually have to go to I'm a home repair person or something. So I've got a geography that I can only reach to. It sounds like with however many millions or hundreds of millions of users that are available on the Twitter thing, I don't necessarily want to engage with somebody that's in Mississippi, because I'm here in Northern California in the San Francisco Bay Area. How do can you do that? Can you?
Yeah, absolutely. There are advanced search features on Twitter which enable you to filter geographically. Like if you wanted to search on, people that were having a conversation about these, a TV station near Mountain View, you would just type that into the search box. And there are other ways you can go about it.
So it's good.
The algorithm
That's cool.
the algorithm is interesting in that they look in the bios and they look for any locations that are left in a Twitter user's bio, and they also look to see if they went ahead and they located themselves through a mobile phone, and you can do that as well. And that way then people are given a location and you're able to go ahead and find information.
All right, so Twitter makes some sense. Obviously, you like to identify that there's conversations people are having about a particular topical subject matter that relates to you, that you've written about in your blog, and you can direct some communication to them. So that's one avenue. What about some of the other avenues? Where does LinkedIn fit into this kind of a picture for a business? Where does Facebook pages fit in, or any of the other primary ones that we might want to think about?
You know, with LinkedIn, it began as kind of your parking spot for your resume, so to speak. But what they've done is they've really incorporated some other social networking features into the site. One thing that we were beginning to see is when we created updates, which you can create on your LinkedIn profile, and we were creating them with the blog articles that we wrote, we were getting quite a bit of traffic coming from LinkedIn looking back at what we had. We also created, and Susan created, a company page for us, and that's another way to connect. But on the profile, which I think is important, is if you're an entrepreneur and you're a writer or you're a public speaker, whatever it may be, there's a section where they'll allow you to create information and a link to whatever publication that you've been featured in. We were lucky enough to be featured in a publication down here called Plaintiff Magazine, and we were able to create a link to our article and then put it on our profile, which
that's cool.
I think is real helpful. So there are different ways that you can utilize LinkedIn in outside of the groups and the networking.
Because I know a lot of people will be using LinkedIn to look for companies or to look for individuals that are involved with an area that they need something in, whether it's a professional service or whatever. And so you're saying that you can use the way you put information into your profile and use that as a methodology to enable people to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're offering services to businesses, LinkedIn, you really need to be there. And a lot of people don't really think about the fact that LinkedIn is really a very rich database. And in order to be found on keywords that you want to be found on, you need to develop your profile in such a way where it's search engine optimized. And the way to do that is to make sure that your profile contains the keywords that people are going to be using to find you as many times as possible, because in doing so, you're creating a profile that LinkedIn believes is relevant to that particular search.
That's a great point.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit. I'm going to switch it a little something, because when we've talked, everything we've talked about thus far in terms of social media has been about these different tool sets, and we've mentioned search engine optimization and what it does for your Google presence. But isn't Google doing more and more to position itself within the social networking environment?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Susan is very good with Google+. I think Google has attempted to buy most of the major social networks. I know Facebook and Twitter, they've done a number of things attempting to buy a social network for themselves, and then they created Google+. And I think
don't they own YouTube?
Yes.
They do?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean? I mean, Microsoft doesn't have a position in social networking, does it?
No.
That I'm aware of?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
And I know Microsoft and Google kind of like compete to a certain degree because of the search engine thing, Bing and Chrome and all that sort of stuff. But where is this going? Because of their entry into the environment, other than the fact that they're the 800-pound gorilla, does it change? Is the environment changing in any way, shape, or form because of some of the technology that they're looking to bring to the table?
Well, it's still early on with Google+. They launched it last year, and it's seeing growth. But the area that, and they're looking to compete with Facebook. And you can imagine individuals who have been on Facebook for a number of years, they've got their family pictures and so on and so forth. That's going to be a challenge to inspire people to make the move. But what they've done, what Google has done, is set up the platform in such a way that they've made it desirable for businesses to adopt, because businesses who participate in Google, and most businesses out there are very interested in their search engine rankings.
Yes.
They are rewarding their participants by providing them with higher ranking and providing them opportunities to be seen in some of the new features that they've done. So they are, kind of
They're courting them.
Yes, exactly. That's a good word. That's a
And
good word.
they've ramped up, Dave. I mean, it was extremely explosive. There's 170 million registered users for Google+, and it just started. There have been a lot of articles written by a lot of the thought leaders in this niche talking about how there aren't a lot of people there. I think it's still a social network that's growing and finding its way. You find a lot of businesses are there, and they're, again, looking for that search engine optimization advantage. Individual users, I think, are beginning to start to discover.
That kind of want to circle back on that, what you just talked about, saying that a lot of businesses are implementing that, because this whole started this whole conversation with the idea, well, how does a business owner, a small entrepreneurial business owner, a small company, or a professional that works for somebody else that is that's trying to, how do they reach out through the social networking environment? And so it sounds like the Google Plus environment is something worth exploring at the very least, because it may have some advantages.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's still early on, but the growth in the last 3 months in terms of engagement has really grown. I was just reading a study today where the top 100 brands, 22% of them have followers in excess of 100,000. So, you know, that's showing that people are slowly starting to adopt, and just like it took Twitter a few years to really take steam. I mean, I think the early adopters of Google Plus will certainly get their benefits.
Dean, before we started this segment of the show, you were mentioning that something about YouTube as well, and that the whole concept of data and information that's currently now going out on 140 character bits through things like Twitter, that there's sort of like a seismic shift going on in the environment. So I want to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure, a large one, and it's very interesting. I believe it was Q4 of last year. Cisco came out with their prediction on internet traffic, and internet traffic is defined by the content that goes out on the internet.
Sure.
They said that right now, internet traffic was consisting of about 50% video, and then the other 50% was written word and video, or photography, whatever it may be.
Video.
Right. They said by 2015, that number will change and shift to 90%. So 90%, 9 out of every 10 pieces of content on the internet, is going to have some kind of video component to it. And I think that's something that a lot of companies are still shifting to understand. YouTube is a great platform for it. It's a huge, huge search engine opportunity. I think it's the second largest search engine behind Google, and Google owns it, obviously.
Yeah, the mobile evolution is really feeding that.
Oh,
it's a lot easier to watch a video on something that's this size than it is to
read text. That's true. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, interesting. So what does that mean for the entrepreneurial, the guy like me who's looking at how do I start to, what year did you say this? They're expecting this 90%?
2015.
2015. That's just a couple of years away from
right
now.
around the corner.
So unless you're at a point where you're expecting to retire in the next 2 years, it's going to impact you.
Sure.
Okay. So what does that mean for a guy like me?
I think for a guy like you, what it means is if you have a service or a product that you can perform a tutorial on, then start a little series of tutorials on what it is that makes that product work and how it works and what it does for a business. I think it also means that people don't want to necessarily read their content. I know Susan and I have looked, and there are statistics I wish I could quote to you, but if you write a blog article and you don't put a picture on that article, it's far less likely that article will be read immediately. And so with video is the next evolution from obviously from a still shot.
Sure.
And people really enjoy watching video, albeit if it's short.
I was going to say
that's the caveat.
They're not looking to see War and Peace on TV.
Right.
They're looking for something that's going to be succinct and to the point. So it would seem that the idea then is if to focus in on one item, one element, and maybe you're doing what, a 2 or 3 minute video clip about this specific thing that's part of your overall offering. You can't tell everything in 3 minutes, but you can certainly 3 minutes is a reasonable amount of time to explain one point.
Sure, sure. And a lot of people get it done in 1.5.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like it's just like what you do with blogging. You're going to be looking at creating videos that showcase your expertise, but also if you have an event or you're going somewhere, you want to take advantage of your personality. You want
Sure.
people to see who you are as a person, because they want to connect with people that they like. They want to
Right.
buy from people that they
And
like.
of course, the technology is available for that right now. We've probably got
Sure.
3 or 4 minutes maximum left in the show. Okay, so I want to, well, make it 2. So I want to ask you guys in this last 2 minutes for a summary, or give us some of the pearls here that we've talked about a lot. I'm going to shut up now. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the most important thing is just to approach this from a targeted standpoint. You know, always know who you're trying to reach, and write to what they need to hear from you, and find them where they can be found.
I think if I were to add to that, because those are all great points, think of your writing, think of your blog, or whatever you're going to do to create that message. Think of that as your hub, your centerpiece, and your publication platform. Surround that with the social networks. Surround it with your own real-life speaking engagements, with your going out and meeting people in real life, and surround it with maybe a Facebook page, a Twitter account, a LinkedIn account, and then tie them together. Use the widgets, those little logo emblems, put them on your blog, and so there's synergy back and forth, and so people have different windows in which they can come find your information.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, with that, I think we're going to say that we've put a lot of information out for our audience, and hopefully some of this is sinking in. I know it's been sinking in for me, and you and I, the two of you, have talked to me about this more than once. So and every time we discuss it, I learn more about how I might be able to utilize this. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining us on Reference Point. Don't forget you can send in queries at info@referencepointtv.com. If you have any questions about what we've talked about, we'll make sure that Susan and Dean get those questions. And if you have any other ideas as to what might make a good show content here, let us know that too. So Susan, Dean, thank you so much for being here again with me.
Thank you,
Greatly
Dave.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time on Reference Point.